It was 6:47 p.m. on a Thursday in late October when I saw my father's car parked on Maple Street, 3 blocks from where he said he'd be working late. I remember the exact time because I'd been checking my phone obsessively, waiting for his text saying he was on his way home for dinner. Mom had made his favorite pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the kind that filled the house with warmth and the promise of normalcy. She'd set the table for 3, placed his water glass at the head like always, and kept glancing at the clock with that particular expression she wore when she was trying not to worry. "He's just running late," she'd said, more to herself than to me. "The project deadline is tomorrow. You know how he gets." I knew, or I thought I knew. My father, Michael Chen, was a structural engineer for a firm downtown. For the past 3 months, he'd been coming home later and later, citing the demands of some big commercial development that was behind schedule. "Just until we get this wrapped up," he'd promise, kissing Mom on the forehead before leaving in the morning. "Then things will go back to normal." But things hadn't gone back to normal. They'd gotten stranger. I'm 17, old enough to notice patterns, old enough to sense when the air in a house changes texture. And our house had changed. The silences between my parents had grown longer. My father's phone, which used to sit casually on the kitchen counter, now stayed in his pocket. He'd started showering as soon as he got home, even on days when he claimed to have been sitting at a desk all evening. My mother pretended not to notice. She'd always been good at that, at smoothing over rough edges, at maintaining the appearance of normalcy. But I could see the way her hands trembled slightly when she set his dinner aside to keep warm. I could hear her crying in the bathroom late at night, the sound muffled but unmistakable. That Thursday, I decided to bike to the library after school to work on a college application essay. The library was downtown, not far from my father's office building. I'd thought maybe I'd surprise him. Maybe we'd drive home together. Maybe the sight of me would remind him that we existed, that we were waiting. I'd taken a detour on my way there, cutting through a residential neighborhood I didn't usually pass through. That's when I saw it. His car. A silver Honda Accord with a small dent in the rear bumper, from when he'd backed into a shopping cart 2 years ago. Unmistakable, undeniable. It was parked in front of a small Cape Cod-style house with white shutters and a well-maintained garden. The house number was 847. I stopped my bike across the street, my heart suddenly pounding with a rhythm I didn't recognize. Maybe he was meeting a client, I told myself. Maybe this was work-related. Maybe there was a perfectly logical explanation. But even as I constructed these narratives, I knew they were lies. Because my father's car was parked in the driveway, not on the street. Because the house looked residential, intimate, not like any office or construction site. Because some part of me, the part that had been watching and noticing and trying not to understand, already knew what this meant. I sat there on my bike for 10 minutes. Maybe 15, my feet planted on the pavement, my hands gripping the handlebars. The October air was cool, carrying the smell of wood smoke and decomposing leaves. Halloween decorations adorned several houses on the street, plastic skeletons, fake cobwebs, carved pumpkins. The whole scene felt surreal, like I'd pedaled into someone else's life. Someone else's discovery. The front door of 847 Maple Street opened, and a woman stepped out onto the porch. She was younger than my mother, maybe late 30s, with auburn hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She wore jeans and a cream-colored sweater, casual and comfortable. She laughed at something someone inside had said. Her face lit with an ease I hadn't seen in my own house in months. My father appeared behind her. He looked different than he did at home. Lighter, somehow. Younger. He was smiling in a way I'd almost forgotten he could smile. Open. Unguarded. Happy. He touched her shoulder, leaned in to say something that made her laugh again. Then he kissed her. Not a quick peck, but a real kiss. The kind that spoke of familiarity and affection and 1,000 previous kisses. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not a dramatic breaking, but a quiet fracture, like ice developing a fissure. I watched this scene. My father kissing a woman who wasn't my mother in front of a house I'd never seen. And I felt the architecture of my understanding collapse. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a routine, a pattern, a whole separate life running parallel to ours. My father walked to his car, got in, and drove away. He didn't see me. He was too focused on whatever internal world he inhabited, whatever compartment of his mind held this woman, this house, this betrayal. The woman watched him go, waved once, then returned inside. I stood there for a long time after both of them had disappeared. The street was quiet except for the sound of wind through the trees, and a dog barking somewhere in the distance. The Halloween decorations seemed to mock me. All these cheerful representations of fear, of things meant to frighten, while real horror was unfolding in silver Honda Accords and white Cape Cod houses. I didn't go to the library. I rode home slowly, my legs heavy, my mind numb. When I got there, Mom was still in the kitchen, Dad's dinner still waiting in the oven. "Did you see him?" she asked hopefully. "Did he say when he'd be home?" I looked at her, at the lines around her eyes, at the gray starting to show in her hair, at the wedding ring she still wore faithfully, and I lied. "No, didn't see him." She nodded, accepting this, returning to her vigil of waiting, and I went upstairs to my room, closed the door, and tried to process what I'd witnessed. The human mind is remarkable in its capacity for denial. Even when you've seen something undeniable, witness truth with your own eyes, part of you immediately begins constructing alternative explanations. Maybe it was a colleague. Maybe it was a sister I didn't know about. Maybe I'd misunderstood what I'd seen. But I hadn't misunderstood. The kiss wasn't ambiguous. The familiarity wasn't accidental. I had seen my father in his secret life, and now I had to decide what to do with that knowledge. For 3 days, I said nothing. I watched him come home late, watched him lie to my mother about where he'd been, watched her believe him because believing was easier than facing the alternative. I sat at dinner tables that felt like stages, everyone performing their roles. Devoted father, loving mother, normal teenager, while underneath, everything was rotting. The weight of the secret became physical. I felt it in my chest, in my stomach, in the way I couldn't quite take a full breath. I was carrying something too heavy for one person, something that would change everything once released. On Sunday evening, I made a decision. I needed to know more before I could decide what to do. I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening. I found my father's laptop in his study. He'd left it open, unlocked, pulled away from his desk by a phone call from his boss. I had maybe 5 minutes. I opened his email, my hands shaking, my heart racing with the particular guilt of invasion and the desperate need to understand. I searched for Maple Street first. Nothing. Then I tried a different approach, looking at his sent messages from the past few months. There were hundreds of emails to someone named Rebecca Cole, not work emails, personal ones, messages that started formal and became increasingly intimate. Planning dinner together, sharing private jokes, discussing a future that didn't include my mother or me. I can't wait until things are settled, he'd written 2 weeks ago. Until I can finally be honest about us. I hate lying to everyone, but especially to Emma. She deserves better. Emma. My mother's name. He knew she deserved better, and yet he kept lying. I scrolled further back, finding the beginning of their correspondence. It had started 8 months ago. Professional at first, Rebecca was an architect working on the same commercial project. But the tone had shifted quickly, becoming flirtatious, then romantic, then committed. I haven't felt this way in 20 years, he'd written. I forgot it was possible to feel this alive. I closed the laptop, feeling sick. This wasn't just an affair. This was a whole relationship. A whole emotional life he'd built while pretending to be working late. He was in love with someone else. Had been for months. And every evening he came home and kissed my mother and sat at our dinner table. He was lying. I heard his footsteps on the stairs and quickly moved away from his desk, slipping out of the study just as he returned. He smiled at me in the hallway, that public smile he wore at home, and said, "Hey, kiddo, how's the college essay going?" "Fine," I managed. "Need any help?" "I'm pretty good with words." I looked at him, at this man I'd known my entire life, who taught me to ride a bike and helped with my math homework, and told me he'd always be there for me. And I didn't recognize him anymore. He was a stranger wearing my father's face. "No, I'm good," I said, and escaped to my room. That night, I made a list. Not because I'm naturally organized, but because I needed to see everything written down. Needed to make it concrete. The list had 2 columns. Tell mom and don't tell mom. Under tell mom. She deserves to know the truth. She's being lied to every day. She can make informed decisions about her life. The secret is destroying me. It's the right thing to downer. Don't tell mom. It will destroy her. It will destroy our family. Maybe it will end on its own. Maybe I misunderstood. It's not my place, once I tell her. I can't take it. Becky stared at these columns for hours, weighing them, trying to find the right answer. But there was no right answer. Every choice led to pain. The only question was who would carry it. Around midnight, my mother knocked softly on my door. "Honey, are you still awake?" "Yeah." She came in, sat on the edge of my bed the way she used to when I was little. "Is everything okay? You seemed distant lately." I looked at her in the dim light from my desk lamp. She looked tired, worried, still completely unaware of the truth lurking 3 blocks away on Maple Street. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just stressed about college stuff." She reached out and brushed hair from my forehead. "You can talk to me about anything, right? Whatever it is." The irony was crushing. Here she was, offering herself as a confidant, while I held the secret that would shatter her world. "I know, Mom." She kissed my forehead and left, and I lay awake for the rest of the night. My list crumpled in my hand, no closer to a decision. The breaking point came on Tuesday evening. My father came home at his usual late time, 8:30 p.m., claiming he'd been stuck in a meeting with contractors. My mother reheated his dinner, set it in front of him, asked about his day. He answered with practiced ease, manufacturing details about problems with structural load calculations and permit delays. I watched him lie with such fluency, such comfort, and something inside me snapped. "How's the project on Maple Street going?" I asked suddenly. He looked up, fork halfway to his mouth. "What? The project? On Maple Street? The one that's been keeping you so busy?" My mother looked between us, confused. I thought the project was downtown. It is, my father said too quickly. I don't know what she's talking about. I saw you there, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Last Thursday, at 847 Maple Street. Your car was parked in the driveway. The color drained from his face. The kitchen fell into the kind of silence that has weight, that presses down on everything. What is she talking about, Michael? My mother asked quietly. He set down his fork carefully, his hands shaking slightly. Emma, who lives there? I interrupted. At that house? Sweetie, he started, reaching toward me. Don't, I said, pulling back. Don't call me that. Don't pretend. I saw you kiss her. My mother made a sound, not quite a gasp, more like the air being pushed from her lungs. What? I can explain, my father said, the most cliched phrase in the world. The thing every cop person says when there's no explanation that will make it better. Explain what? My mother's voice was strange, hollow. Explain what, Michael? And so it came out, not cleanly, not all at once, but in fragments. Yes, he'd been seeing someone. Yes, for months. Yes, it was serious. No, he hadn't meant for it to happen. Yes, he still loved us. No, he didn't know what he wanted. With each admission, my mother seemed to fold in on herself, becoming smaller, dimmer. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just sat there, absorbing each betrayal like blows, until finally she stood up and walked upstairs without a word. My father and I sat in the kitchen, the space between us vast and unbridgeable. I'm sorry you had to see that, he said finally. I'm sorry you did it, I replied. You don't understand. Your mother and I, we've been drifting apart for years. Rebecca, she understands me. She makes me feel. I don't want to hear it. I cut him off. I don't want to hear somehow Mom's fault or how you've been so unhappy. You made choices. You kept making them. Every single day. You chose to lie to us. You're right, he said quietly. You're absolutely right. Are you going to leave? Is that what this is? Are you leaving us for her? He didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. I don't know, he finally said. I need time to figure out what I want. You've had 8 months to figure that out, I said. How much more time do you need? I left him sitting at the table with his cold dinner and went upstairs. I could hear my mother crying in her bedroom, the sound muffled but unmistakable. I stood outside her door for a long time, wanting to comfort her, wanting to apologize for being the one who'd finally spoken the truth, wanting to take it all back. But you can't put shattered things back together. Not really. You can try, you can glue the pieces, but the cracks remain visible. The breaking point is permanent. The next few weeks existed in a strange suspended state. My father moved into the guest room. My mother went through her days mechanically, teaching her classes at the elementary school. Coming home, existing. The house that had once felt warm became cold, every room heavy with things unsaid. I tried to focus on school, on my college applications, on the normal life of a senior in high school. But normal felt like a foreign country I'd been exiled from. My friends talked about homecoming and their SAT scores and who was dating whom. And I smiled and nodded and pretended their concerns could touch me. But I was somewhere else. I was in the space between before and after, watching my family dismember itself in slow motion. My father tried to talk to me several times, tried to explain, to justify, to somehow make me understand that adults were complicated and feelings were messy, and life wasn't black and white. I listened politely and felt nothing but a cold anger that I didn't know what to do with. "I'm still your father," he said once. "That doesn't change." "You're right," I replied. "It doesn't change. You'll always be the father who chose someone else over his family. That's permanent." He flinched but didn't argue. Halloween came and went. I didn't go to any parties, didn't dress up, didn't participate in the pretense of fun. I sat in my room and ignored the doorbell and thought about how we were all wearing masks all the time, pretending to be people we weren't. In early November, my father sat my mother and me down in the living room. The formal setup told us everything before he spoke. "I've decided to move out," he said. "I think it's best for everyone if we have some space to figure things out." By figure things out, you mean move in with her? My mother asked, her voice flat. "Rebecca and I, yes, we're going to try living together." My mother nodded slowly, like this confirmed something she'd already known. "How long has this been planned?" "It's not like that." "How long, Michael?" "A few weeks." We started looking at apartments after everything came out. So he'd been planning his exit while still sleeping down the hall from us, while still eating meals my mother prepared, while still pretending there was ambiguity about his choice. "When?" my mother asked. "This weekend. 2 days." He was giving us 2 days to adjust to the end of our family as we knew it. "Okay," my mother said. "Okay." She stood up and left the room. And again, I was alone with my father in a space that felt impossibly vast. "I'm sorry," he said. "I never wanted to hurt you, either of you. But you did." I said simply. "You hurt us every day for 8 months, and then you kept hurting us after we found out. So I'm not sure what you want me to say. I want you to understand that I still love you, that this doesn't change how I feel about you. It changes everything," I said. "You can't separate yourself into pieces like that. You can't be one person with her and a different person with us. Everything you do affects everything else. That's how families work, or how they're supposed to work." He looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. He was seeing me for the first time as a person rather than just his daughter. "When did you get so wise?" "When I had to be," I replied. "That Saturday, I helped my father load his belongings into a U-Haul truck. My mother stayed upstairs, unable or unwilling to witness the physical dismantling of our life together. So it was just him and me, carrying boxes down the stairs, loading furniture into the truck, doing the practical work of separation. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? He'd made his choice, and now we were executing it. Reducing 20 years of marriage and partnership to cardboard boxes and labeled containers. The last thing he loaded was his drafting table, the one he'd used to teach me about geometry and perspective, about how buildings stood up and why structures mattered. I remember being 7, sitting on his lap, watching him draw straight lines with a ruler, explaining how foundation determined everything that came after. "Foundations matter," he told me. "Once they're set, you can't really change them. Everything above is built on what came before." Now his own foundation was cracked, and everything built on top of it was collapsing. "I'll call you," he said when the truck was loaded. "We'll set up a regular schedule. Dinner once a week, maybe. And you can come stay at the new place whenever you want." "With her?" I asked. "Rebecca wants to get to know you. She understands how important you are to me. She's been part of destroying my family." "I don't want to get to know her," he sighed. "I understand you're angry, but maybe someday I'll what? Accept this? Pretend it's okay? Sit at her dinner table and make small talk while mom is alone at home?" Your mother will move on too, eventually. She'll find someone who makes her happy. This could be good for everyone. I looked at this man who taught me about integrity and keeping promises, who'd read me bedtime stories about heroes and honor, and I didn't know him anymore. You know what the worst part is? I said, it's not that you fell in love with someone else. It's that you stayed and lied. If you'd been honest 8 months ago, if you'd had the courage to leave when you knew your heart wasn't in it anymore, that would have hurt. But this is worse. Because every day you stayed, you made us believe in something that wasn't real. You let us build our lives on a foundation you knew was cracked. He opened his mouth, closed it, had no response. Goodbye, Dad, I said, and went back inside. I watched from my bedroom window as he drove away. The U-Haul truck disappeared down our street, carrying pieces of our life toward his new one. And I thought about foundations and structures and how quickly things can collapse. When the base isn't solid. My mother came into my room an hour later. Her eyes were red but dry. She'd moved past crying into something else, a kind of determined survival. We're going to be okay, she said, sitting on my bed. I don't know how yet, but are we? I asked. We have to be. We don't have any other choice. She was right. I realized. This was the paradox of heartbreak. You survived it because you had to. There was no alternative. You woke up the next day, and the day after that, and slowly the acute pain became chronic, and you learned to function with it. I'm sorry I said. Maybe if I hadn't seen him that day, if I'd kept quiet. No, she interrupted firmly. Don't do that. Don't take on blame for his choices. You told the truth. That's what you're supposed to do. The fact that the truth hurt doesn't make it your fault. But I broke everything. He broke everything. You just made it visible. She took my hand. And maybe that's better. Maybe living with a lie is worse than facing a hard truth. I wanted to believe her. But in that moment, sitting in my bedroom in a house that felt too big and too empty, I wasn't sure which was worse, the comfortable lie or the devastating truth. The months that followed were strange. Life continued in a way that felt surreal. I went to school, completed my college application, attended holiday gatherings with my mother's family, where everyone tried not to mention my father's absence. We rearranged furniture, trying to make the house feel less empty. We developed new routines that worked for 2 instead of 3. My father tried to maintain a relationship with me. Weekly dinners, as he'd promised, though I often canceled at the last minute. Occasional texts asking about school, my college search, my life. I responded minimally, maintaining the bare minimum of contact that let me tell myself I hadn't completely severed the relationship. He invited me to meet Rebecca properly. I declined. She's not trying to replace your mother, he explained during one of our awkward dinners. She just wants to be part of your life. She is part of my life, I said. She's the reason my family fell apart. That's a pretty significant part. That's not fair. Our marriage had problems before Rebecca. I interrupted. Don't try to rewrite history. You were married. You made a commitment. You broke it. Rebecca helped you break it. Those are facts. He didn't bring it up again. In January, my mother started seeing a therapist. She came home from her first session looking exhausted, but somehow lighter. She asked me when I'd last done something just for myself. Mom told me over dinner, and I realized I couldn't remember. Everything I've done for the past 20 years has been for your father or for you. I don't even know who I am outside of being a wife and mother. That's sad, I said. It is. She agreed. But it's also kind of exciting. I get to figure it out now. She started small, joined a book club, signed up for a painting class, went to dinner with friends she'd neglected during her marriage. I watched her slowly emerge from the grief, not healed but healing, learning to exist in this new shape of life. Do you think you'll date again? I asked her one evening. She considered this. Maybe, someday, but not yet. Right now, I need to remember how to be just Emma, not Michael's wife, not your mother, just Emma. I understood that. I was doing something similar, learning to be someone whose family existed in fragments, whose father was no longer a constant presence, whose understanding of reliability and commitment had been fundamentally altered. In March, I got my college acceptance letters. I'd applied to schools mostly on the East Coast, several hundred miles from home. When I'd started the application process, I thought I was choosing based on programs and campus culture. Now I realized I was choosing escape. I called my father to tell him about my acceptances. He congratulated me, asked which school I was leaning toward. Probably Boston, I said. Good engineering program, nice campus. Far from what? He asked, though we both knew. From reminders, I said. From seeing places where we used to be a family. There was a long silence. Then, I understand you're angry, but I hope someday you can forgive me. I'm not sure forgiveness works like that, I said. I don't think you get to do something that destroys people and then expect they'll eventually be okay with it. So you'll never forgive me? I'll just be the villain in your story forever. You're not a villain, I said. You're just someone who made selfish choices and broke his family. That's not villainy. It's just sad. I love you, he said. I need you to know that. I know. But love isn't enough, is it? You loved Mom too, and you left anyway. So I guess I know that love doesn't mean you won't be abandoned. It was cruel, I knew, but it was also true. On a warm evening in April, I rode my bike past 847 Maple Street. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to see it again to confirm it was real, to face the place where my old life had ended. The house looked the same. White shutters, well-maintained garden, a silver Honda Accord in the driveway, my father's car, exactly where I'd first seen it 6 months ago. I stood across the street, just as I had that October evening, and I watched. After a few minutes, the front door opened, and they came out together, my father and Rebecca. They were dressed for an evening out, laughing about something, his hand on her back. They looked happy, genuinely happy, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not pain, just a strange emptiness, because this was his life now. These were his choices. He'd chosen this house, this woman, this future, and it had cost him his old family, his daughter's respect, 20 years of history. But he'd made the trade willingly. I wondered if he thought it was worth it. If in his quietest moments, he regretted the destruction he'd caused. Or if love, this new, exciting love, was enough to justify everything he'd broken. I thought about that kiss I'd witnessed 6 months ago. How happy he'd looked. How light. And I realized that maybe that was the cruelest part. Not that he'd left us for someone he hated, but that he'd left us for someone who genuinely made him happy. It would be easier to hate him if his choice had been obviously wrong. But from his perspective, maybe it wasn't wrong. Maybe it was the right thing for him. Just not for us. I turned my bike around and rode home. Back to the house where my mother was probably reading or painting or doing any of the small things she was learning to do for herself. Back to the life we were building from the pieces he'd left behind. Graduation came in June. My father attended, sitting several rows behind my mother, respecting the distance she requested. After the ceremony, we took photos, awkward, fragmented photos where I stood with Mom, then separately with Dad, but never all together. The absence of togetherness was documented in empty spaces, in photos that should have existed but didn't. "I'm so proud of you," my father said, hugging me in that careful way we developed, affection tempered by distance. Love filtered through damage. "Thanks," I said. "Boston's lucky to get you." Yeah. Rebecca had stayed in the car, understanding without being told that she wasn't welcome at this event. I appreciated that, at least. Some boundaries were worth respecting. That night, my mother and I sat on our back porch, watching fireflies drift through the yard. "Are you ready?" she asked. "For college, for everything." "I don't know. Is anyone really ready for things to change?" "No," she admitted, "but they change anyway." We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then she said, "I don't want you to carry anger forever. For your dad, for what happened. Anger is exhausting. It takes up so much space. So I'm supposed to just forgive him? Pretend it's okay?" "No, but maybe you can make peace with it. Not for him, but for yourself." She looked at me in the dim light. "What he did doesn't have to define you. You get to choose who you are, what you believe about people and relationships and trust. Don't let his choices steal your ability to believe in good things." "What if I can't trust people now? What if I always think they're lying, always waiting for them to leave?" "Then you work on that," she said gently. "You recognize it's a wound and you treat it, but you don't let it become who you are." I thought about that, about wounds and treatment and becoming, about how trauma could shape you without defining you. "How did you get so wise?" I asked, echoing my father's words from months ago. "When I had to be," she replied, echoing my answer. "I left for Boston in August. My mother helped me pack, labeling boxes, organizing my dorm room essentials. We drove up together, just the two of us, talking about everything and nothing during the long hours on the highway. My father called the night before I left. "I wish I could help you move in," he said. "It's fine. Mom and I have it covered." "I know. I just wish. I wish things were different." "Yeah," I said. "Me too." "Will you call me once you're settled?" "Sure." I didn't promise more than that, because I didn't know what our relationship would look like going forward. He would always be my father. Biology and history ensured that. But the shape of our connection had fundamentally changed. We were being rebuilt on a new foundation, and I didn't yet know what that structure would look like. My first night in my dorm room, I couldn't sleep. The sounds were unfamiliar, the darkness different from home. I lay awake thinking about family and fracture, about how quickly certainty could dissolve. Around 2 a.m., I got up and pulled out a small box I packed at the last minute. Inside was a photograph, the last family photo we'd taken, from the summer before everything fell apart. My father, my mother, and me standing in front of our house, smiling like we believed in permanence. I looked at that photo for a long time, at the three people who'd thought they were unbreakable, at the naivety captured in that frozen moment. I almost threw it away, almost tossed it in the trash, a symbolic rejection of the lie that image represented. But I didn't. Instead, I put it in my desk drawer, not displayed, but not destroyed. Because that moment, however false it became later, had been real when it was happening. We had been a family. We had loved each other. and pretending that never existed wouldn't change what came after. The breaking was real, but so was the before. It's been 2 years now since the October evening when I saw my father's car on Maple Street. 2 years of learning to exist in a family that looks different than it used to. 2 years of therapy and difficult conversations and slow, imperfect healing. My father and Rebecca got married last spring. I was invited. I didn't attend. My mother started dating someone, a kind man who teaches history at her school. I've met him twice. He seems good for her, patient with her cautiousness, understanding that trust is something she has to build slowly. And me? I'm learning that people are complicated, that love doesn't guarantee permanence, that families can break and the pieces can survive separately. Learning that forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing, but about releasing the grip of anger so it doesn't define you. I talk to my father monthly now. Brief calls, surface conversations. The kind of relationship you have with someone you're related to, but not really connected with. Maybe someday it will deepen again. Maybe not. I'm learning to be okay with uncertainty. But there are things I know for certain now. Truths I learned from watching my family fracture. I know that people contain multitudes. That someone can love you and still choose something else. I know that secrets have weight. That lies accumulate until their mess becomes unbearable. I know that truth, however painful, is better than comfortable deception. I know that you can't build lasting things on weak foundations. That pretending problems don't exist doesn't solve them. And I know that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is recognize when something is broken beyond repair. When the kindest choice is to stop trying to force pieces to fit that no longer align. Last month, I drove past 847 Maple Street for the first time in over a year. The house looks the same. White shutters, maintained garden. The same Cape Cod charm that witnessed the beginning of the end of my old life. My father's car wasn't in the driveway this time. Maybe they'd moved. Maybe he was at work. Maybe I'd simply chosen a different moment than the one that had defined my understanding of betrayal. I didn't stop. Just drove slowly past, acknowledging what that place represented, then continued on. Because that's what healing looks like, I think. Not forgetting, not erasing, but being able to witness your own pain without being destroyed by it. Being able to remember without being consumed. My mother asks sometimes if I regret speaking up. If I wish I'd kept my father's secret. The answer is complicated. I regret the pain my honesty caused. I regret being the catalyst for my family's destruction. But I don't regret the truth itself, because living in that lie, watching my mother wait for a man who'd already left, pretending normalcy while everything rotted underneath, that was its own kind of destruction. Slower, maybe, quieter. But just as complete. At least this way. We had the chance to rebuild on honest ground, even if what we rebuilt looked different than what came before. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that October evening, about the exact moment I saw my father's car and understood what it meant, about the choice point between ignorance and knowledge, between comfortable lies and hard truths. If I could go back, would I take a different route home? Would I avoid Maple Street entirely? Preserve my family's fiction a little longer? I don't know. But I do know this. I saw something true that evening, and truth, once witnessed, can't be unseen. It demands action or complicity. There is no neutral ground. I chose action. I chose honesty. Even knowing it would break things. And now I live with the consequences. A fractured family. A complicated relationship with my father. The knowledge that people I love are capable of profound selfishness. But I also live with integrity, with the certainty that I didn't enable the lie. That when I saw injustice, even injustice perpetrated by someone I loved, I spoke up. That's not nothing. That's something. My father called last week. I've been thinking, he said, about that day you saw me. How different things might be if you'd just kept driving. You'd still be lying, I pointed out. Maybe, or maybe I would have ended it with Rebecca, stayed with your mother, tried to make it work. Do you think that would have been better? He was quiet for a long time. Then, I don't know. I'm happy now, but the cost was so high. Was it worth it? I honestly don't know. Would you do it again? I asked. If you could go back to 8 months before I saw you, would you still start things with Rebecca? Another long silence. I want to say no, but I think, yes, I think I would, because I was so unhappy, and she made me feel alive again. But I'd do it differently. I'd be honest sooner. I wouldn't drag it out, wouldn't lie for so long. So the problem wasn't the affair. It was the deception, maybe, he admitted. Or maybe the problem was wanting to incompatible things. The comfort of my old life and the excitement of something new. Maybe you can't have both. You can't, I confirmed. You have to choose. And your choice, whatever it is, has consequences for other people. I know, he said quietly. I think about those consequences every day. We ended the call shortly after, and I sat with his words. He was happy now, in his new life with Rebecca, but he'd purchased that happiness with my mother's pain, with my fractured trust, with the destruction of 20 years of shared history. Was it worth it? Can happiness built on someone else's suffering ever really be complete? I don't know the answer. I just know that choices ripple outward, that decisions made in private eventually become public, that nothing exists in isolation. My father chose Rebecca. He chose his own happiness over his family's stability. And now all of us live with that choice, carried forward into whatever futures we build from these fragments. This summer, I'm planning to spend a month with my mother. We're going to drive down the coast, stopping at beaches and small towns, taking our time. A trip for two, a celebration of survival, of what remains after everything breaks. My father knows about the trip. Sounds nice, he said when I told him. Maybe next summer, you and I could do something similar. Maybe, I said, non-committal, because I'm not ready yet. Maybe I will be someday. Maybe I'll reach a place where I can sit in a car with him for hours, where we can have conversations that go deeper than surface pleasantries, where I can see him not just as the man who broke my family, but as a full person with complexities and struggles and his own pain. Maybe, someday, but not yet. For now, I'm focused on the relationship that endured. The one with my mother, who stayed, who chose the harder path of rebuilding, who teaches me daily what resilience looks like. She's teaching me other things too. How to trust carefully but genuinely. How to love without losing yourself. How to recognize when something isn't working and have the courage to walk away before resentment calcifies into hatred. These are lessons my father taught me too. Though not in the way he intended. I still have that photograph in my desk drawer. The last family photo, taken in innocence. Sometimes I take it out and look at it, trying to remember who we were before the fracture. It's harder now. Memory has a way of being rewritten by present understanding. I look at my father's face in that photo and see things I didn't see then. The slight distance in his eyes. The way his smile doesn't quite reach them. The subtle lean away from my mother's embrace. Were those signs always there? Or am I projecting current knowledge onto past images? I don't know. Memory and truth are complicated partners. But I keep the photo because it reminds me that things change. That certainty is an illusion. That the ground beneath us is always shifting. And the best we can do is learn to maintain balance as it moves. On October 31st of this year, 3 years after that first sighting, I'll be back home for a long weekend. My mother has asked if I want to drive past Maple Street, to face the place that started everything. I'm considering it, not because I need closure. I'm learning that closure is a myth. That wounds heal, but scars remain. That some questions never get satisfying answers. But maybe because I need to see it with different eyes. Eyes that have spent 3 years learning about complexity and forgiveness, and the ways people hurt each other even when they don't mean to. Maybe I'll see just a house, just a regular Cape Cod with white shutters and a garden, no more significant than any other house on any other street. Or maybe I'll see it for what it really is, the physical marker of a turning point. The place where one version of my life ended and another began. Either way, I'll survive it. I'll witness it and acknowledge it and move forward. Because that's what we do. We face our pain. We integrate it. We carry it forward not as a burden, but as wisdom, as hard-earned understanding of how fragile and precious trust is, how easily broken and how difficult to repair. My father said he was working overtime, but I found his car parked outside her house. That sentence changed everything. It revealed a truth I didn't want to know, started a cascade I couldn't stop, led to the ending of one story and the beginning of another. If I could go back, would I look away? Would I choose ignorance? Some days, I think yes. I think about how much easier it would have been to not know, to exist in the comfortable fiction a little longer. But most days, I think no, because truth matters, because living authentically, even when it hurts, is better than living comfortably in a lie. My father made his choices. I made mine. My mother made hers, and now we're all living in the aftermath. Building new structures on damaged foundation, learning that family isn't always permanent, but the lessons it teaches you are. I'm still learning what forgiveness means, what trust looks like after it's been broken, how to love people who've hurt you without letting that hurt define the relationship. I don't have answers yet. Maybe I never will, but I have truth, painful truth, and somehow that feels like enough. Late at night, when I can't sleep, I sometimes imagine an alternate timeline. One where I took a different route home that October evening, where I never saw my father's car, never witnessed that kiss, never spoke the truth that broke everything. In that timeline, my family stays intact. My parents continued their careful dance of disconnection, maintaining appearances. I go to college believing in permanence, in the reliability of love, in foundations that don't crack. But I'd be believing in a lie. A pretty lie, a comfortable lie, but a lie nonetheless. And maybe that's the choice we all face. In different ways. Comfortable fictions versus difficult truths. The security of ignorance versus the burden of knowledge. I chose knowledge. I chose truth. And yes, it broke things. But it also freed us to build something real. Even if what we built looked different than what came before. That has to count for something. It has to. Because if it doesn't, if honesty and integrity and facing hard truths don't matter, then what does? I'm still figuring that out. Still learning to navigate a world where people I love are capable of profound selfishness. Where commitment is conditional. Where forever is a word without guarantees. But I'm figuring it out with clear eyes. Without illusions. without the comfortable lies that make pain easier but truth impossible. And maybe that's the gift. However painful, clarity, understanding, the knowledge that I can survive difficult truths, that I can face my own pain without being destroyed by it. My father said he was working overtime, but I found his car parked outside her house, and everything changed. Not all at once, not dramatically, but completely, irrevocably, permanently. The family I knew ended that evening, but I survived. We all survived. And somehow, in the wreckage and rebuilding, I found something worth keeping. Myself, my integrity, my commitment to truth, even when it costs me. That's not nothing. That's everything.